All right, guys. Sorry, I'm late. Mismanaged my time, doing some laundry, doing some other things. I need to get my drain cleaned in my basement because it's backed up. Even though I try to use lint traps and things, too many people in the house putting stuff down the drain, backs up the drains. All right. Anyhow, we are here. Was my timekeeper. Yeah. I'm a little grizzly this morning. All right. Where do I want to start with this? So this has been an ongoing, I feel like it's been big the last year, 2 years. It wasn't so much a conversation that I was having a lot early on in the corner, but I've been having online conversations about it, offline conversations. Should we be proselytizing? What is happening? TP? What are we talking about? I'm like, do I have something on my face? Okay. That's essentially the question. I put in the comments, Hezi, my boy, I would love it if you're able to come and play, and Mark. There's so many different ways into this conversation. So, Noah, President Foxman, I was messaging with that cat the other day. Also, there's so many. Okay. Preface before I get into my should we be proselytizing? Even my title is should people who are right, we who are right, sorry, Freudian slip, convert others to their rightness. There's a little bit of the exclusivist religion on the right side of history there, right? There's also a little propositional tyranny, because what do we mean when we say people who are right? Are we saying right in the ideas that they're professing, who have the right axioms? People don't like being poked in their axioms. Are we saying people who are living rightly? Are we talking about behavior? And this gets into the conversation of heresy. It gets into the conversation of anathematizing people. And what is the point of anathematizing people? But I think even deeper than that, it gets at the idea of identity and being. What does it mean to exist? And it's obvious, I think, once you see it. But to exist is to be something and not something else. Which is the deepest part underneath this, which was related to mysticism. So I know Mark is here. I think the Grail Country conversation I wasn't able to be part of, which I don't think was really about mysticism at all, because I watched it and I wasn't able to comment because I was preoccupied doing other things. But I don't even know what they ended up talking about. So, all right. I used to have on Twitter, and now I'm back. I have all these notifications on Twitter, and people are engaging me on Twitter because I started that up again. But I don't think I want to do it. I don't think I want to be involved on Twitter. There's too much distracting me. I can't even keep up with YouTube. Should I add Twitter in? Okay. Noah. Back to Noah. Sorry. Spastic. Okay, let's go. To Noah, I said... we were having a conversation back and forth about when someone sends you a picture that's sideways, it's such a challenge, isn't it? Because then you try to turn it sideways and then it flips again, and then you just keep flipping it. I don't think he'd mind me sharing this. So he said, in our generation, the primary problem with evangelism isn't that we're doing it with bullhorns and low-grain bigotry. It's that we're not doing it at all. I think this is from a John Mark Comer book, I think. Jason's here. So happy. In a recent Barna Group poll, also anytime I hear statistics, there's about to label statistics, or they're about to put out some statistics from polling or whatever, and I'm not anti-statistics, but there's this great quote, which is, probabilities are the prophets of the mechanical God. That's good. McMo, get a little chest lettuce. That's an old TLC reference because I used to just wear undershirt V-cut neck shirts when I was cooking on Discord. Okay. But probabilities are the prophets of a mechanical God. So recent Barna Group poll, 96% of millennial Christians say part of my faith means being a witness about Jesus. And 94% said the best thing that could ever happen to someone is for them to come to know Jesus. Okay. But a full 47%, nearly half, also said it is wrong to share one's personal beliefs with someone of a different faith in hopes that they will one day share that same faith. That is a jarring inconsistency, and it's not surprising given our times. We live in a pluralistic postmodern culture where any form of Christian proselytizing is offensive to our modern sensibilities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then he said something later. The anti-Christian proselytizing shtick is based on self-defeating logic because everyone is proselytizing. Everyone is preaching a gospel. The question is not, are you preaching a gospel? It's what gospel are you preaching? So, and I've gotten a lot of that pushback here, and I like that. From Jason, this isn't a meat market. This isn't a place for you to pick up girls. Although, bad comedy. What's your name? I should know your name. Why can I not remember it? Dunbar number. I should know your name. But Jason, this is, although relationships and procreation has happened in the corner. So, all right, let's get rid of that ridiculousness. So this is where I don't know. I'll probably continue to piss people off because I will preach my gospel of not proselytizing. But here's the thing, Perry. Okay, got it. Thanks. Thank you, Batcom. Perry, good to see you. But this is what I would say when I preach my gospel of not proselytizing. Okay, I am not saying that other people shouldn't proselytize. Because I don't. This is where I would bring in Jordan Peterson and say when he talks about having prescriptions for how to fix the world and suggests that starting with take the log out of your eye, purifying your own eye, which I think is also what Jesus and the Bible says largely. Although there's some differences of opinion there. I don't know that Jews would fully say that heresy. And someone said to me the other day that the point of taking the log out of your eye is so that you can help take the log out of someone else's eye. Is that the verse? Let's go look it up. The full context of the verse. Take the log out of your own eye. And let's look at it. ESV comes up first because that is appropriate. That's what we want is Matthew 7. Let's go Matthew 7. I like NASB or the Holman Christian Standard Bible. Do not judge. Let's just read it. Let's share a screen and read it. Why not? Because this is a very share screen. Oh, I can't because it's in a different window and it's not in Chrome. Why am I opening up things in other web browsers while I'm trying to just do it in Chrome? Because I don't like Chrome. But that's my bad. Okay, here we go. We're getting there. Extra sacred version. Yes. Here we go. We're there. Okay. Judging others. Do not judge. Let's just go right away to the footnote. What do we say? Make a habit of judging or have a judgmental attitude. This is, because this is where it's Greek translation. It's not one-to-one. And shout out for Ted S., his convivium lecture that he gave at the Arkansas Poetry TLC meet group with Father Eric and Dr. Jim were the main guys there. And Ted's lecture on one-to-one versus many-to-many correspondency with language is fantastic. I will keep recommending it forever until as many as need to see and hear it, watch it, which will be the people who do. See it and watch it. Okay. Do not judge so that you will not be judged. For in the way you judge, you will be judged. And by your standard of measure, it will be measured to you. Do you think if we really took that seriously, if I took that seriously, I would live differently in the world? This gets into Jason and Cal and my ongoing conversation about five-giveness and forgiveness. Because if the measure that you use is forgiveness, and if that's the judgment that you give to other people is that we should all forgive each other, then that is what will be measured to you, is absolute forgiveness. Man, that seems good, doesn't it? Why do you look at the speck that is in your brother's eye and do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of my eye, and look, the log is in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you'll see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before pigs, for they will trample them under their feet, and turn and tear you to pieces. Then it goes on to the golden rule. I mean, ask, and it'll be given to you, etc., etc. I could just keep reading Jesus forever, because he's pretty awesome. So take the log out of your own eye. And what Jordan Peterson, circling back, means by that, circumambulating, here we go, is because he says, here's the problem. Because if you're wrong, and very often we are wrong, and you just apply it to yourself, it just affects you. But if you apply it to other people first and you're wrong, at scale, it gets worse and worse and worse. Because he would argue, kind of from the Gulag Archipelago type thing, that when you're wrong at a national scale, millions may die. If you're just wrong with yourself, with the choices that you make and how you live your life and how you're taking the log out of your own eye and your prescriptions for what is wrong with you, that just affects you and then those that are in your immediate circle. It's much less dangerous, perhaps. Should we convert other people? Well, I guess there's one thing that's in there, is you're assuming you're right. And I've gone around and around with people with this conversation my whole life, because of course you think you're right. That's why you hold that opinion. If you didn't think it was right, you wouldn't hold that opinion. You would hold a different opinion. Mitch, I'm going to want you in here, dude, if you have time later, because you're one of my major pushbacks, buddy, which is good. But I think the deeper thing that's going on is, should we convert other people, is, and I'm going to bring up Chad and the God of your understanding and personalist knowing, and that all proper knowing is only through initiation. So again, personalist knowing is the same thing as the God of your understanding, essentially. But I would say it is the integration and the unity of all the 4 Ps: propositional, procedural, perspectival, participatory. Those integrated and unified and lived, because the point is to live everything, is personal knowing, is proper personal knowing. And what is interesting about this, my mailman has this special, I don't know what it is. It's like a little tick or something where it's a good habit, but he will give the mail, go pass, leave, turn around, double take every day. And he looks back, just looking. It's the same thing. It's like Groundhog's Day, which Sherry told me I should rewatch the other day, but because it's good, because it's profound, she said. Because I'm always looking for, hey, put in the chat, put in the comments. Friday night family movie night. Good, wholesome, good family movies. They don't wholesome. That doesn't, I'm not saying like they have to be Christian, puritanically safe. Good movies. I want to know. Family movie night. Put it in the chat. All right. So personal knowing is the integration of all those P's, and then it's lived. And if proper knowing, lived knowing, only happens through initiation, you only really come to the fullness of your proper understanding through being initiated in it, which is to live it, because an initiation involves all those P's. It has to be fundamentally idiosyncratic. It's personal to you, because all of the constraints that are on your life, everything that is involved in your initiation is necessarily unique to you. Because if you had different constraints on your life, this is a thing that I got from my boy Cal, is you would be them. Cal has said this in terms of judgment, which is related to, obviously, to Matthew 7, judge not lest you be judged. It's an interesting thought, is to say that one of the reasons it's wrong to judge someone else is you are not initiated as them. You do not have the same constraints on your life as they do. And if you had all the same constraints on your life as they do, you would be them. And I think that's in line with, and so you can't judge them because that's that great lower back tattoo. Only God can judge me, or wherever it would be, here, or what, some here maybe. And I think that, I actually think that's true. It's kind of a platitude level thing, but I think it's true. And St. Paul says, I don't judge any man. I don't even judge myself. I think the reason that is because he knows that he has not been properly initiated to judge himself. And this gets into one of my weird theories, is that what I think a human being is creator, because we are made in the image of God. And so we are called and made to be creators. And I think our first creation is ourselves, that we learn through initiation, and the fullness. And as Jordan Peterson said, that little quip, which I need to go back and find, what conversation was that in? Was that in his Russell Brand conversation? It was just one of those little blips that he drops that PBK usually stops and focuses on, because he said a lot there. It's one of those little blips. The fullness of life involves death. I think that is Christianity right there, trampling down death by death. What does it mean to be a human being? Behold the human being. Father John Bear looking at the crucified Christ. And so at the fullness of your life, at the fullness of your lived reality, at the fullness of you pouring yourself out in love for other people, forgive them, they know not what they do, and taking their blame into yourself. And I don't mean that in a weird penal judicial way, but I mean in your body, not in an abstract way, in a very embodied way. That's what it means to be a human being. And actually, that's the narrative and the story that resonates with all of us. I mean, it is. That's all the good movies, all the good stories that you watch. That's why you like them, because it involves Christ-like self-sacrifice. So, back to all the judgment stuff and converting other people. This is why it's the difference between identical replicationism and actual. So I want to touch on this one couple last things. It's the difference between identical replicationism, which is what factories do, and actual creation. So, and this gets into my distinction between institutions and bodies, because what factories do intentionally is to create identical replicants, the same thing over and over and over and over. Bodies don't do that. Artists actually never create the same thing. I actually think it's impossible. It's like when you have a child, when you are a painter, when you are a songwriter, you can't create the same thing. Even when you're doing a play where it's written, this is why plays are really good and Shakespeare's so good. And even my boy, Gabriel Marcel, who was I believe this is true, he was a French existentialist from the 20th century, and he was a playwright. And one of the reasons he didn't like to do essays and write that much, I think a lot of the stuff that's written, I even have a book of his, but I think they're all taken from orations. I think he gave them as speeches, and he would also write plays. And I think the reason that he wrote plays is because a play, again, identity of identity and non-identity, a play is the same thing over and over and over again, but it's not. But it's new every time. There's new characters, new things happen, there's new innovations, there's new riffs. It's the same and different simultaneously. And that's why plays are magical. That's true creation. That's true art. And the difference between bodies and institutions is that institutions seek to do, I don't think they consciously do this, but they do, because they are based in the spirit of the machine, and they are based in the medium of the written word. That's an assertion that I have. Modern institutions evolved from the written word all the way back to when it, got huge in Gutenberg, obviously, but Socrates' lament of the written word, it will make us forget. And it has made us forget, which is why we are where we are with the meaning crisis, nihilism, all this stuff. And that is institutions. But institutions are collapsing because we're rediscovering true mystical knowledge, which is personal through this. The despirited breath of the written word is becoming revivified through the medium of YouTube, podcasts, this weird technological thing that's happening. And but it always, the difference between a body, a real body, something that's creating true life, I would say, is that it's not producing identical replicants. And so it's not always going to give you what you think you want. That reminds me of that Alan Moore, the end of that Alan Moore quote on magic and grammar is he says, let me look it up quick. I have it right here. Am I ready at my phone? Alan, come to me, Alan. Also, Alan, you could come in and tell jokes later too. Our Alan with a Y, right? So it is not the job of artists to give the audience what the audience wants. Because again, what the hell do you know? Like Jordan Peterson, what do you know what you believe? What do you know what you want? You maybe think you know what you want. Do you know what you need? Right. So it is not the job of the artist to give the audience what the audience wants. If the audience knew what they needed, they wouldn't be the audience. They would be the artist. It is the job of artists to give the audience what they need. And I don't even know that that's fully true, but it's the job of the artist to give them what they can't not give them, I suppose. It's that thing that you find in you that you just cannot not do. And that's real creation. But that's not factories. That's not institutions. And that's the problem. That's my broad problem with confessionalism and the institutional church is it's not surprising that it produced a bunch of regurgitative replicants that just say the Sunday school answer. Because that's what that is meant to do. But here's the thing. The church is meant to be a body. That's the biblical language. And even I had this conversation last night at my book club is people will say like, what about the institution of the family? It's not an institution. I'm gonna strongly, I'm not a fan of planting my flag, but here I plant my flag to unplant it later. Bodies and institutions are different things. Now, the problem is like Christ plays an antichrist. So there are times when institutions will do things that bodies do. I'm not saying institutions fundamentally never produce real life and good things because they're operative in the world. And so because they're operative in the world and because of grace and because I'm a good Calvinist, let's call it common grace. They will, a broken clock is right 2 times a day, right? They'll get it right sometimes, but as a rule, they're producing replicant things because the medium is the message. And Christ, McLuhan, this is another one of those things. This line, you could just meditate on it forever. I want to get it fully right of what McLuhan says, but essentially it's like Jesus Christ is the one place where the medium and the message are the same thing, are one. And I have it saved in here because my boy Stephen gave it to me. Can I find it amidst all my other pictures I've been taking recently? Got it. All right. I'll read the context. As a result, to teach catechism as a given or as content is to limit oneself to only half of Christianity. Amen. The formal cause, the ground that is perceived unconsciously, is not words, but that are part of the faith which operates in our lives. The two should be united. Faith and works, whatever. In Jesus Christ, there is no distance or separation between the medium and the message. It is the one case where we can say that the medium and the message are fully one and the same. And I agree. And here's the thing. This Colossians 1, this is the last thing I'll say, I think, and then I'll open it up. Colossians 1, the whole mystery of Christ. Ooh, I want to do one little shout out. So Sam Tiedemann sent me this conversation between Dr. Gavin Ortland, and Dr. Michael Horton, who are both Calvinist guys. Horton is more classically reformed. Ortland is more Baptist Calvinist type thing. the a la carte Calvinist, choose your own adventure Calvinism. And it's an amazing, I almost want to put it in here. I'll maybe edit this later, at least mine, because it was an enlightening conversation. And Horton said explicitly, no. I mean, I've just never seen somebody say something so succinctly that is mathematical to like my whole everything I'm about. But he said in there fundamentally, because he was talking about the secret sacred self, God within you, and it only comes from outside. It had very much this hard line between inside and outside, and salvation is from without, not from within, because they have this hard line about the subject objective divide. I mean, I don't know what it is. It's just, and he said explicitly, Christ in you. I can't remember. I time stamped and quoted the comment. I don't know if I still have it saved on my phone, but he said something. Yeah, Christ in you is explicitly. I don't know. I always screenshot these and send my comments to other people, but I've deleted them. I don't want to look it up. It is no salvation. And he was saying, like, and I'm like, no, that's exactly what salvation is. How else could it be anything else? Because that's the whole point, is that is what it means when the medium and the message, when your faith and your works and everything becomes one thing, that is Christ in me. Because Christ is the one place where the medium and the message is the same. And when that becomes true in the fullness of your life, that is Christ in me. But that's where your medium and your message is the same, where there's no distinction between your language and what you're saying and your self-identity and your words and your being. It's where they're the same thing. Because that's maybe what it means to be God. All right,
Luke,
I'll open this up. Lance, what do you think?
Can I share something for you?
Oh, you're really quiet.
I'm really quiet?
Yeah, at least for me. I can't really hear you.
Okay, let me see. There is a, can you hear me now?
No, you're still really quiet. Is that just on my end? Go speak again. Maybe I had my volume down the whole way. Talk again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that was me. You're really quiet because I don't have my volume up.
I want to share something. So in PDK kind of treated this in homeroom this morning. It's the Glenn Scrivener conversation he had. And there's a little 60-second clip. I just tagged you on X with this from Elizabeth Oldfield. And when I saw this, I immediately thought about you, because in 60 seconds, she kind of describes, like, if you want to know what Luke's personalist knowing, anti-confessionalism or whatever. So let me play this.
Ooh, let's do it. Fun times.
And share. All right, let me play this little clip from Elizabeth Oldfield. And this is her response to, and you'll see at the very beginning, we asked the question, like, well, this is about whether Christianity and everything else. And kind of, he's like, well, if you got to believe all these rational beliefs or whatever. And she goes in and she describes this. So anyway, let me play this clip, because when I thought about this, Luke, I was like, this is Luke Thompson.
All right.
If you have to believe a series of things which you know to be rationally not true, people don't want to do that.
So I don't think these are two separate things. I think in the practice of the rituals and the communities and the practices, those are modes of attention. They shape us. That you have had Ian McGilchrist here all the time. There'll be lots of people here who know the work of Ian McGilchrist, who talks about the different modes of attention of our brain hemispheres. We live in a left hemispheric world. It has trained us to see certain things. The way you pay attention changes what you are able to see. Ritualized, communal, emotional, embodied forms of practice literally make it easier for you to see what is really there. I think God is really there. I think there is a logic of love in the universe that wants to meet us. But if you have to start with, I can't get on board with that. I don't know how to make sense of the metaphysics. But like Pascal, I'm just going to go to church and see what happens. Those things actually come together into a beautiful union.
Absolutely, because that's initiation. She's saying you can't.
Which you know to be rational.
It's what you see and hear depends a lot upon where you're standing and the kind of person you are. So to bring in that, and then I want to hear what other people have to say. I know so PVK, he was playing that same video in his homeroom today, and I left the comment because PVK said this, which was kind of the inspiration for whatever I was going to say today. And at 32, 38, he said, what kind of Christian do you want Jordan to become? And usually the answer is the same kind as me. And I said, what's in a name? A label? Everything? Nothing? Because the problem is, again, it's back to that whole constraint thing. What you see and hear depends a lot on where you're standing and the kind of person you are. That is fundamentally unique to you. Because all the constraints on your life is what makes you you. Those are all the exclusions that make you who you are and not someone else.
Right.
And so like to the other people can't see, that's the God of your understanding. The other people can't see what you see because they're not you.
Right. And so this is the 60 seconds, which we're talking about the material reductionist, whatever. And he's leading like, well, how can I believe something if I have all these rationalist, things that I believe, and I can't believe in this other stuff? How can I do it? And she's like, go to church, put yourself into it, attend to it, do the practices, all do these things, and you know what'll happen? You'll meet the real God, right? Like, so many people can't jump in or pursue because they have all these rationalistic, propositional, or they see the confessions, and I can't buy off on all these confessions, and she's just refuting that and saying that's not how it works. Like, that's not how it works. And so what she's saying, the same way when Jonathan Pageau or Paul Vanderklay just say, go to church. Jonathan Pageau is not, he is, but he's not saying go to Orthodox church. Paul's not saying go to a CRCNA church. They're just saying go to church. Start attending to the things, start embodying it, start living it. And that's where you break out of that rationalistic frame and what we were pursued to. And then ultimately, and this is what 12-step programs have all figured out. Okay, don't focus on any sort of proposition. Start living a life of spiritual practice and a program of action. And you know what happens when you do that? God will disclose himself to you, and it will become, quote unquote, real.
Hey, everybody else. Welcome.
And I think that's where Roy Clauser was right, because I don't think you have to say that it's even Christ. I said the real God could be not Christ, because I know plenty of people that will find God and they won't want to call him Christ.
Yes, well, man, I really want to go into that. That's maybe even a separate live stream, because that's a private conversation that I've been having with someone about me being this weird mix of not insisting on my own language because it's going to be the God of your own understanding. But I just call that in everyone else. That is Christ. That's Christ in me. That's Christ in you. I mean, that's the core of mysticism. But the problem is like, if you're not to the place where you see that or believe that or use other language, it doesn't do any good for me to impose my language on you. So.
And I believe if you find it extremely offensive, then that's okay too. I think that's right, and we are wrong.
It can be very triggering. I think sometimes the universal Christ thing can be a little triggering for some people because they just have been very traumatized by church culture.
Yeah.
And so some sensitivity there is
holy shit.
I mean, it's perfectly fine within your own frame to see the world that way, but we don't have to have everybody agree with the use of language to be agreeing in principle.
Right.
Well, and Chad, you would agree with this, which is I can't require that you believe in Christ within a 12-step program, but it's okay for me to believe in Christ because that's the God of my understandings. So what Chad's saying here, he's not saying that you can't tell your own experience, strength, and hope. Now you can we try not to use that language in 12-step programs when you're in certain meetings, but when you're talking to someone one-on-one, of course you would use those sorts of things, but you don't impose it on anyone, yet you get to talk about your own experience. So Luke, for example, if you're explaining your spiritual experience and understanding and God of your understanding through Christ, that's okay. Like, that's what you get to do that. It's just not requiring other people to use the same terms and words.
Yeah, what else can we do? I mean, we won't be able to talk. All right, everyone else. Aaron, Sam, I don't know. Sam E. Do I know you?
We've chatted a very small amount on Discord, but yeah, it's the first time I've been on the stream here. So yeah, I'm not usually available in the middle of the day, but I happen to be today.
Well, fantastic. Do you have thoughts on all this? Because I mean, it's a big issue. People get heated and like push back on me hard about my anti-proselytizing.
Well, I think I might know the answer, but my question to you would be, what do you say if someone asks, are you a Christian? I mean, I assume you don't sing the song at them.
I do. I say, I am a C.
I am a CH.
I am a CH.
Yeah, catchy tune.
I do. This is kind of a tension for me. So because of what I think by iconic thinking, which actually Jonathan Demir made a couple great mashups of iconic thinking recently, where I was just like, awesome. Thank you for doing that. It's wonderful. Because of what I mean by that, which is because all of reality is iconic, I think. And I think because of where we're at, because of institutions and confessionalism and identitarianism, I think the way out of that and the death of that is to embrace what I call iconic thinking, which is it's not that we need to stop using particular exclusive language to describe ourselves, like perhaps Christian. I actually think Christian isn't exclusivist, because that's the nature of what Christianity is, because it's both simultaneously. But even though, because people are so triggered by that, like what Mark was saying, I recognize all that. But I think, but I still think you need to say the words. The reality is I still do identify as being a Christian, and I know that that's going to be hard for people for reasons that I think are completely legitimate. I have the same things, but I have to keep using the language, I think, because of convictions that I have about the importance of naming. I think.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I'm wondering, I think some of these things rise up to us as interests, as our little pet projects, as you were saying, you desiring to convert people to non-conversion, or however you wanted to say it, is the notion of the splinter in our own eye. Is like, my feelings about people's sins is that they generally bring up the thing that relates to them least or most, right? So people who don't struggle with being gay, they just won't shut up about homosexuality as a sin because it's least relevant, or they won't shut up about the things that are most relevant towards them. That's how they progressed, or what it's either the thing that is the most annoying to them or the least that seems to gather the most attention as far as for correction. Because when you guys were saying, oh, the universal Christ, that could be a big issue for people that had like Jesus thrown down their throats or whatever. For me, I grew up around like hippie dippy liberal Catholics. And so the universalist Christ for me, like I face palm at that for the exact opposite reason. Because the way that was brought up to me was, don't learn any tradition because there's no point, because there's no wisdom. They're all the same, man. Don't even worry about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the way I received that. That's the splinter in my eye. That's the way my attention goes, most and least, which is different than you.
Yeah, which is something I would not affirm at all. Like, that's some weird kind of Gnostic nothingness, ridiculousness. I know Mitch is going to want pushback. Huh?
Well, I want to ask another question, though. So if you have a friend or a coworker or someone in your life who is not a Christian, and maybe in particular if they affiliate with another faith, like if they're Buddhist or Hindu or Jewish, do you feel like they sense some kind of confrontation if you say, I am a Christian, or if you in some way wear it on your sleeve, or you make it open?
Do I personally?
Yeah. Do you sense that they might think that is being a confrontation?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's probably kind of related to what I was saying before. Is I think that I know a lot of people are going to have that baggage and that struggle when I say that. There's just nothing, I can't do that. And I have convictions about still calling myself that, even though I don't think that they are perceiving what I mean when I say that.
Yeah.
The same thing.
If you're sober at a party where everyone is getting shit-faced, they won't like you. Like I remember when I first became a Christian, I didn't put it on anyone else. But then I was hanging out with my old friends, and I wasn't getting stoned anymore, and I wasn't drunk, and people experienced that as judgment. I didn't even care what they were doing, but
Right.
people just knowing that I was holding myself to any standard. It can be very frustrating to be.
Well, and that's such a funny thing. It doesn't even mean that it's like some conscious standard that you're doing. My wife was very much that way. Like she had this idyllic high school experience and didn't drink at all, but it was always out at parties, friends with all these people, having a great time. But she wasn't even thinking like, oh, they're a bunch of drunk losers and I'm self-righteously not drunk. She wasn't thinking that. She was just having a good time. Whatever, you do you. It is possible to live within your own convictions and being, while not even necessarily being self-conscious of it, because that's the humility thing that C.S. Lewis talks about. It's not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. Right. You could just be at a party, not thinking about yourself or them or anyone else, and just being and not judging everyone. And it's possible.
What's interesting, and I don't know about you guys, I seek judgment out upon myself. And after I first became a Christian, I experienced people that I worked with knowing that I didn't believe in what they believed. The guy who was sleeping around with a ton of women would ask me my opinion on his relationship stuff. Like he wanted me to tell him, I disagree with everything you're doing and this is why. And he wanted to have that conversation. I didn't initiate it. I liked him. I loved him. He was a good friend, right? And so as a result, he actually like welcomed my judgment. Not was like, don't like, it came from a place of please. I want to hear it if it's true.
Yeah. And there's a way that you can say that, like you can say what you think, but have it not be a condemnation of the other person. Like I'll tell you what I think, but that doesn't mean that I'm sitting over here like, because that's the idea. That's the idea, I think, between judgment or discernment and condemnation that's come up for all the time in this corner is I think it's possible to exercise discernment where you have opinions about something, but while simultaneously not judging them because of everything I was saying about judgment before, because you're not in the place to judge them.
I guess I personally have no problem with the label, but at the same time, I mean, Blue Like Jazz was popular for a reason.
Yeah.
Right. So obviously it's a common thing where people do feel like there are a lot of things that have been associated with Christianity. And I guess in the context of North America, sort of big box evangelical Christianity, which I probably actually have more positive feelings towards than most of the people in the corner. But I mean, that is what people think of a lot of times when they hear the term Christian.
Oh, for sure.
What? Luke, yeah, okay, yeah.
You're
Can
good.
You hear me?
Yep.
Okay. One thing I've been wanting to run by Hezi for a while now and see it discussed in the corner is to see the corner work in the long term. There has to be room there has to be space and openness for cross-pollination.
Yes.
And that is for just let's make it a binary for the sake of argument between Jews and Christians. For that is for Christians to become Jews and Jews to become Christians without us collapsing into anxiety or running away and cloistering ourselves. And I think the real test, I think, of this, if it's at all possible, it may not be possible, would be imagine your children. And I think it's a much bigger ask from, say, Hezi and Jacob than it would be from one of us, say, to have a child marry into or just overtly convert into outside of our faith. and because it is, there is a, I think Sam had brought up that Judaism over 2,000 years of struggle has built up antibodies to protect itself from erosion through conversion, and but we're no longer there. We're here and now, and I think for the little corner to work, and then even within Christian denominations, we need to have room for. We're doing it in a way. Baptists become Catholics and vice versa, and all of that. But it has to happen, or it won't work, and it is not sustainable long term. So the question is it possible? And I guess the second question, there is no second question, because I'm asserting if it's not possible, the TLC can't last.
My question about all of this is, I mean, and it's kind of a statement too, is it seems like it all depends on what your goals are. Like, what are your goals? You know, like, there's a reason why I don't just come out and say, like, I'm a Christian and you need to think like I do, in like some of the groups that I run in, because like it's not the goal. And so it's like I try to think of if you're walking past, I mean, use hyperbole or something. If you're walking past a cliff and you see somebody's dangling there for dear life, you don't ask them, you know, like, who did you vote for? Who do you sleep with? Is it a man or a woman? What kind of God do you believe in? You just kind of like move into action, and your purpose there is to serve and try to help. And that's the principle that I think is that I find most useful in any frame. And also, it's to me, it's not to deny my God at all, because I wouldn't do that. I would share with you what I have found if you ask, right?
Yeah.
But Chad, you are judging that person is in danger and that they need your help.
They can be visibly in danger. The people that are depressed, who, if you find somebody who's
we're all in
self-harming,
danger. We're all in danger.
I mean,
that's what I'm trying to say. It's like the humility of the situation is we are all dangling from the cliff, and if you think you're not, then you're not paying attention.
Or we're all burdened and we need help sharing each other's burdens. Is another way of looking at it. It doesn't have to be a rescue metaphor. But yeah, I think Chad and I are evangelists of a sort, in that we're very interested in bringing those to faith who are ready to come to faith. If they make ourselves available, make ourselves available to the service of others. I can't speak, but anyway, yeah, I think what you're saying, Chad, resonates with me.
Well, even if it's like, you know, the person who's like, oh, it's the crystals, man, we're gonna do it with the crystals. Fine, I don't care. Do it with the crystals. Do you want to walk with me?
It's fine as long as the crystal's called Jesus.
Let's walk together. Like, let's do that, and then I'll because that to me is a big piece of faith. It's not just what I believe, but like, you know, like what I've seen happen, and I've seen people transform this way. So yeah, if the corner is going to work, I mean, it's intrinsically not Christian.
All right, so I want to say something as the moderator starter of this. Chad and I were talking about this the other day, and we were talking about whether or not one should limit live streams, cap it to a certain number of people, because you get into the dynamic, which Estuary has its own framework or protocol for dealing with, is that the people that are extroverted and chatty talk a lot and assertive, and the people that aren't don't. And so I want to leave space right now for people that haven't said anything. How about that? Or if you could argue
that I've said nothing.
Can I ask one poll question, and I'll take myself off the screen, Luke?
Yeah.
So Chad, what you were talking about there, like, I'd just like to ask the people who are listening here, with the way Luke talks about things and has talked about things for years, don't you think he leaves open this space for people to believe and think in the way that they want to believe and think? I mean, clearly he's espousing a thing, but Luke over and over, at least for me, seems to be talking about God of your understanding and leaving kind of the freedom out there. I mean, don't you feel like Luke does that? Like, Chad, I'll ask you first when we go around. Like, don't you think Luke leaves open the freedom that you're talking about?
I think that's a leading question,
But
but I do agree with you.
leading the witness.
Yeah. Well, hey, Aaron Parker here, longtime listener, first time caller. My
own thoughts there is like, I mean, help me understand perhaps, is that sometimes we're talking about these practices and we sort of abstract the practice from content. I mean, these things, if you like turn a prayer wheel in the Tibetan temple, there's something within that thing. It may, that action, it has content, it has things like a tradition, a whole story,
Did you
prepositions
just
loaded
cut that
into
guy off, or did somebody cut somebody off here?
Well, you did, and Anthony did, but I think it was a lag thing. But I was just going to let it roll, but then...
Sorry, am I lagging still?
No, I think so. Yeah, but that's all right. We'll come back to Aaron. He just introduced himself, but continue with your thought, Anthony.
Sorry, yeah. So I mean, I guess it does seem like we're missing something. I think part of the mic, like for example, I think the Horton video, Luke, that you talked about. I think what he's trying to say about Christ in me is something different than sort of the Christ that he would serve. It's almost like he's saying something different, and the content of what he's talking about is different. So I don't know if that really connects, but I don't know. That's what it seems to me, that sometimes like the conversation is, yeah, what does it mean for you to have a God of your understanding? Is that just sounds nice because we're all Christians, right? Tom Holland style kind of thing, or like Richard Dawkins style. Like, really, I really would like to see this actually happen. Like, what does it mean for someone who's completely different context to have this conversation and be part of this conversation? It would be really interesting.
Real quick, what I mean by God of your own understanding is that it is unavoidable. That's actually what happens. And so it's just a statement. It's a statement of honesty. So like, it doesn't matter if you're in a room with 1,000 people. You're going to have 1,000 different understandings of the Father. That's all I mean by it. Sorry, I'll shut up now.
Oh, okay. So the understandings are different, but like seemed like even Lance, when he talked about they'll encounter, use the word real God, right? And is it always going to be the real God?
Well, to try to clarify what I mean by that, well, and I'm going to say confusing things again, is that at the end of the day, I was saying this to a friend too, I don't think anybody really disagrees, because I think there's one reality and I think we're all engaged in it. And I think what Michael Horton was talking about, what I think he would be more faithful to the Bible and tradition of speaking about is the flesh. I think that's what Paul means when he's talking about the secret, sacred self, is what you think that you want. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the divine spark. I'm talking about Colossians 1. I'm talking about the only thing that has real existence. And the succinct response to that whole video that I said in there is, receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your soul. That's my complete answer to that video.
But isn't that word given in baptism, right? Like within a very specific sort of cultic practice and community, like you talked about, right?
Yeah.
So you can't be saying that to someone who's like completely apart from that tradition, which is embodied in its rituals. So it's almost like, can we even say the proposition about the implanted word to someone who's not even close to that tradition? Like, is that fair to have a conversation with those terms at least?
Yeah, I mean, I understand your point and your pushback, and I would affirm that those things are all initiated in those cultic practices, and that's part of it. The problem is you can't force it.
I would lay the same frame over somebody's medical sickness. Do you have whatever whatever? Do you have a son of a bitch, a cancer or like some sort of illness like that, or do you have, are you stricken with a spiritual sickness? So to me, it's kind of the same argument. It's like it doesn't really matter. Like, to me, what really matters here is, like, I just got a call from somebody. That's why I got kicked off, because somebody called me and they told me that they wanted to share some good news with me of a friend of theirs. They heard me talking on these stupid live streams and had built a relationship with me over the years, and they too are a member of AA, and and he wanted to thank me for, doing what I'm doing with AA and stuff that I'm talking about. And all of that is a gratitude, because this guy is now in like a rehab facility, right? His friend is. And this guy felt inspired. Now, I'm not going to take credit for that. That's all God's doing. Is that the real God? I think it is. But the guy in the rehab, he may not think it is. Like, what does it matter? To me, it doesn't matter. That's what's really important here.
Yeah, okay, I want to go back to Aaron. Otherwise, we'll never go back to Aaron, and we'll just continue.
Yeah, sorry. And I'm also, you can probably tell I'm very sleep deprived. So I'm just being real here. I'm not totally sure what I'm saying is going to be relevant. But I think the thing about religious language spiritual language, the thing about spiritual language is not that the words we use are different, but that we're trying to, through words, find the thing that's beyond the words. So with the word Christianity, for me, I just have to accept that when people use it, it has very different connotations. And like, I'm gonna say two things that were on my mind, and hopefully they connect. The other thing I was thinking about was, I think one of our tasks in this culture is to help, as Christians, I think, is to help people feel seen. I think one of the biggest issues, and one of the reasons that people go very far down paths of, basically functionally schizophrenic paths, is that they just want somebody to show like genuine interest first. And there's times where when I say I'm a Christian, that is me saying I need to feel seen before this conversation can go forward. It's breaking the communion of the conversation, in a way. Like, especially if you know the person and you know what Christianity means to them. If they're an absolute stranger, then it may or may not hit in a weird way. But if you know that, like, theoretically we should be trying to know people first before we're trying to suggest that they make radical changes.
It's like an introduction that says, you already know my opinion on everything.
Yeah.
You don't have to ask.
It closes your own ability. It closes off your own ability even your own ability to speak. So it's such a discretionary thing. And I think it takes a lot of wisdom to know when to say you're a Christian. And I'm almost entirely, forgive me, I'm almost entirely critical of Jordan Peterson these days. But that was one of the things that I loved for so long about him, was that he just wouldn't say, and I think he understood why he wasn't saying that he was a Christian.
Well, you can experience that if you ever got into a heated conversation with someone and they would actually say, let me get back to you. I'll ask my pastor. Right. It's like they literally will tell you in the middle of a conversation, I have nothing to contribute that's my own. I have to go back. I'll find out what the correct response within my tradition is, and then I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the version of sometimes when you quote someone and say, well, I don't agree with everything they say.
Yeah.
Sort of a negative version. Yeah. You have to say that.
Yuck.
I want to read this because I just love, this is a huge part of my formation, is this, my evangelical formation is Derek Webb. And Derek Webb is, I don't know, Derek, hopefully you're out there. You should come and join a live stream. That would be fun, because he has been hugely formational for me, but now I think his career is kind of in shambles. Sorry, Derek, if it's not, but he does these live. Never mind. I don't even want to say it. That would be mean. Okay. So he says, they'll know us by the t-shirts that we wear. They'll know us by the way that we point and stare at anyone whose sin looks worse than ours. We cannot hide the scars of this curse that we all bear. They'll know us by our picket lines and signs. They'll know us by the pride we hide behind. Like anyone on earth is living right. And isn't that why Jesus died? Not to make us think we're right. It's, and what's kind of interesting about Derek Webb is he was in a Christian band for a long time, and he was a Christian artist, although he'd always talk about, like, what does that even mean? He said Christian applied to anything except a human being is just marketing. I also think that Christian often applied to a human being as marketing, which is kind of what we're talking about, and virtue signaling. And what's interesting is he has since then had a divorce and deconstructed and no longer self-identified as a Christian. And now he maybe does again, but I don't really know where he's at with all those things. But that's kind of what I think that's what's going on there. Like the t-shirt is the very explicit, obvious, in your face part of it. You know, like if you wear I'll see people with them sometimes, like people with Jesus t-shirts. That's just like, I don't know, that they trigger me. So I know what they're doing to other people.
Why do the t-shirts trigger you?
Because it feels like it's this thing. What is it? It's almost like what David was talking about, of how it feels like virtue signaling, or it feels like somebody shoving something down your throat. It feels like it's a lot more about, like, why would one feel the need to walk around or like go to a placard? It's the same thing of like what's going on with people who go around our picket lines and signs, or like wokeism going around.
Or is it like more like a band t-shirt, or like a t-shirt of my favorite show or something like that? You know, why do people wear t-shirts of anything?
Yeah,
it expresses their identity, right?
I do feel too many people are trying to convert me to anime.
I think we must traffic.
Even Netflix.
Here, Yon God likes that. Yon God, get in here. This is what this is all about. Break the fourth wall. Get in here and speak your yay! Mandy. Yes. Is this Minnesota, Mandy?
Yeah. I don't really do this stuff, and I'll probably have to leave in 1 minute because my baby will cry. But I just kind of wanted to say hi, and I like this topic. So
fantastic. You can just say hi. Do you have thoughts?
My thought is just it's kind of more back what you were talking about, but I feel like the weirdness of evangelism, or why it makes your skin crawl, is what it feels like it kind of does. It's like, the way I've seen it is it kind of like supersedes love to people. So like they feel like they have to justify everything they're doing in terms of evangelism, but it's like then you're not even loving people because you have this like weird ulterior motive, or you have like an event you're doing to just love people that are suffering, and then people are worrying like, well, we're really doing this to make connections and get people to the church, and all this weird reasoning. And I just feel like there's something weird about the Peugeotian love comes first and then evangelism, and when you flip it, it gets like really propaganda and weird. So
yes, I agree with that. And I mean, I think this is a proper illustration. It may appear crass at the first point, but it's being present with someone in a conversation. It's like when you talk about active listening, if you're in a conversation and you're just always thinking you're abstracted away from the conversation, you're not really engaged because you're always just thinking about how you're going to reply or what you're going to say, you're not in a conversation. That's fundamentally, it's about you. You're in your ego. You're not engaged in the conversation. Or like Pete Holmes would often bring up this reference, and I think it's true. It's the same as like if you're having sex, but you're not engaged properly and you're thinking about what you're separate from it, it's utilitarian. It's mammon. You're using it as you're trying to get something from it. You're not actually making love.
Well, and I think it's also a Ponzi scheme kind of idea. It's like the notion of a Ponzi scheme is it only works and only appears as though it's growing if more people are getting involved, right? So it only looks like whatever the stock is going up, which is actually all false, if we have more people investing in it. And so it's like, if we have more people converting, then that's how we know it's true. It's not that it actually gives us hope or us our own personal experience of that. Because like the reason why I want people to know about Christianity is because it's been very enjoyable for me, right? It's the same reason I want people to try butter chicken. Yeah, have you guys ever tried butter chicken? It's like really good, right? Like that's kind of the way I feel about it. Like the first time someone explains to you that you could dip fries in a Frosty, and you're just like, I'm going to tell everyone about this.
Right, and you can't, and that kind of thing isn't even volitional, and it's not necessarily even rational. It's kind of like telling someone, this is my favorite kind of ice cream. If it's not their favorite kind of ice cream.
T-shirt,
yeah,
right? Is some people like the Christian T-shirts not because they're assholes, but because they like it the way that you like a band.
Yeah, and that's great. That's fine.
Well, see, and this is a very we're connecting here, David, because I feel about as different as a Christian can feel from what you just said. For me, I'm like, hey, I was oppressed and held back by Christianity for 35 years, thought I was leaving it, and now I realize that it's firmly ensconced in my head as a language, and that there's a lot of beauty that is like springing up between the concrete. And I basically feel like if I were to evangelize, I'd be selling wilderness to people. I would be the wilderness salesman. I'd be like, hey, maybe you need, like, I don't know how to describe it, but my feelings are so complicated on it that it's just, I'm not arguing with you at all. I'm just saying, like, it just goes to show that we all, even when we use that term, even if we confess the same creeds, we're saying a different thing, right? I'm saying there's a thing that has been revealing reality to me, sometimes painfully, but it's a language of revelation that can work. And there's nothing about Christianity that feels like a dipping a fry in a Frosty for me. And like, I'm actually really glad that is how you feel about it. But I think that is a fascinating thing. Like, and I've actually felt for a long time, like even connecting with other Christians, was really strange, because I'm not saying you don't do this, but people make that normative, right? Like people say, aren't you glad we're sharing this thing together? I was like one of my first things that made me realize I was weird was that somebody, when I was young and still involved in fundamentalist Christianity, they were like, don't you just feel like when you're around other Christians, you just feel this sense of peace and safety, and you're just happy because they're other Christians? And I was like, fuck no. Like, honestly, like that was my immediate reaction. I was like, holy shit, like, is that how I really feel about Christianity? I don't feel that way. So
this is also an overarching thing, is the problem of the converts, is that I don't know how many people within this group are still part of the faith tradition which they grew up in. So like, I have these feelings about Christianity, a form of Christianity which I did not grow up in, right? So all the people who are Orthodox all used to be Protestants. I don't know what the heck I'm supposed to be. But I grew up Catholic, and I'm not that anymore. Like, and so we all are shifting and changing to now say, yeah, but not this form. This form is bad, but the one I am now, that's good. That sparks joy.
Well, and there's some of the problem too, where you're becoming something without even trying. Like, I became not Protestant, not because I wanted to be not Protestant, but because I got exposed to enough that made me realize, oh, I'm not this thing. Yeah. What do I do now? And like this whole conversation, I feel like Tevier and it's Fiddler on the Roof.
I was
But on the
thinking the
other
same
hand,
thing. Yeah.
but on the other hand,
There is
it's
no
like,
other hand.
is there
Yeah,
no
well,
other hand? I don't
yeah.
know. But it's like it's very hard because I grew up in sort of non-denominational evangelical Protestantism that was sort of bland, and went through like a whole spectrum of different versions of Protestantism, some more healthy than others. And I've been through this very evangelical Protestantism, and I'm hearing every criticism, and I'm like, yes, but I also know those people and who do it every day, and they're so genuine, and you've seen the genuine change that they've seen that have come from that stuff, and you go, oh, am I an asshole? Am I the asshole? And so it's
Parents, are your daughters burning incense? Recognize the first signs of orthodoxy.
That's and the fact that I'm like, it's been an interesting thing to watch me go into orthodoxy, not trying to convert my parents into it, but having their own relationship with it, starting from what cult are you joining to,
or
it's all the same. It's all the same. And it's like,
well, and you'll just find something beautiful, right? You'll be in a building, you find something beautiful. It's not an argument. It's not anything else. And it's just like, recognize the first signs of conversion, finding something beautiful.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and that brings the whole beauty ethics conversation in, which I won't go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, there's that recognition of like, what happens when you're struck by something beautiful. And you can't really argue beauty in a rational sense. It has its own sort of argumentative structure that is compelling more than coercive, I guess. But that's a whole different thing.
Maybe some of the beauty in the non-denominational whatever churches that I like how you said they're still good people. They're like some of the best people sometimes you'll ever meet, but it's like maybe that is the beauty of that tradition, is actually seen in the people's lives more than in the beautiful whatever architecture. And there's a little bit of snobbery sometimes in TLC with, obviously, some denominations are better than others here, but I mean, I get it because I'm extremely critical of like my own stuff, but I still like love the people. So sometimes it gets a little like, leave them alone. They're good people.
Yeah, well, it's just hard because you see the defaults and you want to express that, but you also don't want to like tear down something else. You don't, at least I don't want to tear down something else because there is beauty in this thing that I can no longer claim. And like, it's bittersweet. I remember the last service I ever went to, there was this bittersweet moment where I was like, am I doing the wrong thing? Yet there was this confirmation in leaving it too, which I won't get into, but there is something about that. And I got this question from a friend. She converted to Orthodoxy, but her husband wasn't ready yet. And he asked me, do you ever miss it? Do you ever miss the old thing? And I'm like, no, I don't miss it. But then there's something sad about that too, because it was my culture. It was that, like, it's still deeply wired in me and like continues to be unwired in me as I become something new. And you're like in this middle stage where you're not yet this, but you're no longer that. And that's just humanity, and that's just being human. And I think it's a good thing. But yeah, it's like Paul says it a lot, like God is very economical. And when I look at evangelicalism, I have to kind of hold to that and be like, I do think that's true. He's very economical in the way that he works. And I do think he can work through things that are riddled with problems.
Well, and maybe the conversion is a way of observing, judging ourselves. Like it becomes the lens by which we can reflect upon what we used to be. My wife and I just had a vacation to England. We just got back, and she had lived there, and spending any time in a different culture, even one that's so clearly also Western, it then becomes everything that they did became a way of reflecting and observing what my own culture was. And in some of it was just like stupid things, right? I'm in Canada, and in England at the end of time at a bar, you could buy drinks and just walk out with them, and it's legal to just drink in the park and everything, right? It's just like a little thing. But then there would be things that are ideals, but then those ideals place requirements on people. So in England, everyone has their dogs off leash, but all of your dogs have to be trained, and they ban certain kinds of dogs from being owned. So you have the discipline, which then equals freedom. So you can't just say, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we could have dogs in a bar, which they have in England. You can have dogs in a bar. But if you actually want that, if you want that perspective, you have to take the full perspective, which is, well, then they have to be trained, then we have to ban this, then we have to ban, right? Like, I think conversion is actually a way of being self-reflective. It's like a way of actually even appreciating what from your tradition even was real.
And also, sometimes people are allergic to dogs, and they have asthma, and then they can't breathe, and you bring them on the airplane because you have emotional problems and issues. Does my breathing matter more than your emotional problems? Which will die? Who of us will die first?
On the plane, there was an emotional support pug, and my God, that pug was far more anxious than the woman who brought. He's just like, I shouldn't be here. And all pugs have a look on their face like they know they shouldn't exist. They know that they're a crime against God, right? they know that they can't breathe properly. And then you put this thing in a vest like it has a job on an airplane. It's just, sorry.
Oh my goodness. John, have you gotten your audio figured out yet?
No, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Because I'm hearing people talking again and again. It's still happening to me. I myself talking to me. So whatever.
That's a problem of us.
Do you have YouTube open?
No. And
jeez, only Americans have allergies.
You might try closing StreamYard and opening it again. Didn't work.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
There's too many of us on here.
Well, can you push through? Because it's not doing it for me, so I don't know what it is. It must be on your end. But can you push through and just say whatever you want to say?
Yeah, I wanted to throw a dark side in here, and I hate to do it, but this conversation, there seems to be an elephant in the room, at least to me, and that's Islam. And when you're talking about how Christians should act with people and treat other Christians, you treat Islam nice, but you say I'm a Christian, there's a certain percentage of them that'll just cut your head off. I was thinking there was a time that Christians were martyrs, but there was also a time when Christians did crusades. And if you look at what's happening in Europe and America, it's pretty scary. That's one of the main reasons that the atheists are starting to talk about, cultural Christianity. It's because of their fear of Islam. I'm not going to talk anymore because it's really too weird for me.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting, the Islam conversation. We've tapped into that, touched on it, and do occasionally in the corner. I mean, it comes up quite a bit, but I have no idea if Emily, I would love to just have Aaron. I would love to have a conversation with Emily about this. I don't know if she's recorded one anywhere, because Emily, Food Truck Emily, is someone who has a lot of deep relational connections to people who are Muslim. And Emily's great, and so I would love to have a longer conversation on here with her about this, because I know it is a funny thing. I was talking to my wife about that the other day because this is a little bit less intense than someone cutting off your head for you treating them nicely just because you're a Christian or something, which I agree. Like as a Christian, you know, the call is martyrdom. So if that's what happens, you know, that's kind of what happens. But that's my take on it. But so Minneapolis has a pretty big Somali Muslim population, really. And and it's funny because there are all these weird social etiquette things that happen that you get I'm very Midwestern. I'm very, you know, like hold the door for people, let someone go through first, defer to them in the lane or do something like that. And sometimes part of it can be an issue because sometimes with Islamic women, they're not really supposed to look at you or engage you at all. So like that's an issue, but sometimes you'll do things where like you'll defer to them or say something nice to them or do like a Midwestern kind of thing. And they just pretend like you don't exist or don't look at you or potentially, you know, or just are completely indifferent to you. And there's the ego person inside of me that's just like, it's revealing even of my own heart. Cause I go from like this nice deferral thing to just be like pissed off. Like I'm pissed off inside because I'm just like, that's not, I don't know. Is that ethnocentrism and cultural elitism that I would rather live in a world where you defer to people?
You have to find borders. And I think, Cassidy, you were kind of saying this before. I was also thinking about Tevye, about how he has 3 daughters, and the first one, it's still basically Jewish. It's, you know, it's close enough. And then the next one, okay, she's kind of pushing it a bit, but then the last one crosses such a major boundary. And so he always is trying to weigh these options on the other hand. And then with the last daughter, he just says, there is no other hand, right? Like he hits a point where he's able to, he kind of blesses his daughter in the end of Fiddler on the Roof, but he has a loving response, but there also becomes a line that is just like, look, how much respect, I don't have respect for Scientology. I don't. Right? I can have respect for different perspectives and we can talk about it and oh, isn't that interesting? But I have a boundary. And if you cross that boundary, I do think you're being an idiot, right? Like I feel that way and I can't stop it. It's in the same way we feel compelled by beauty. Sometimes I think things are gross and that's the boundary. And now it's gross.
Like in some ways it's like I don't have any, like I could accept that I had to leave Protestantism because I didn't fit into their boundary and I'm not upset about that. Like that's their confessional thing. I get it, but I can't be there anymore. That puts me in a situation of, okay, well, what do I do? But I understand that. I don't always agree with it. And I don't always agree with, I would still be Protestant if I agreed with it, I guess. But, you know, it's like I can understand why there are these boundaries within these religions. I don't know the right way to process it all and how to manage it.
Right.
Like,
but
I'm
how
glad
would that
they
be
exist for others, but you know, I don't know.
How would that be experienced though if someone told you no longer fit in here and you should leave? Versus you coming to that conclusion, I don't think I fit in here anymore. I think I should leave. Right? It's the same sentence. It's just one sounds like a huge asshole, right?
I guess it depends on the type of person you are and the way it's delivered. You know, there's both of those. It's so much more about like human connection, I think, in these things than the actual beliefs. And I think this is where I have that sort of tension with what Elizabeth Oldfield said, where it's like, I absolutely agree with 100% what she said. Like, you cannot understand it unless you participate in it. But there are so many people who have no trust in the church. How in the world are they ever going to have a healthy participation in throwing themselves into something that they have no trust in? It's not going to work. There's going to be this tension in them that it's not going to work. And so, yeah, it's like, but on the other hand, you know, it's like, I wish you could just go in and participate. But there's also some truth of if an atheist goes in and participates long enough in certain traditions, there is a point where there's a breaking point where it's like you're either receptive and you take the next step, or you have to go. And that's not going to be for everywhere, but there are churches where that is true. And you can't deny that.
Have you read A Year of Living Biblically, where it's a secular Jew who then just, for the sake of a book, for a year tries to do everything like every rule he can find. He meets with Orthodox Jews and everything. And it's an incredible examination of cognitive dissonance, because he starts believing it just because he's doing it. But he hits a point where he's at a snake handling church in the southern US. Like, he's actually there, and he feels the spirit in him wanting to do the altar call and become a Christian. But there's something in the back of his head where he actually says, no, I can't do it. Not here. I can't consent. I can't become a Christian in a snake handling church. Come on. Like, he's willing to, within Judaism, go, okay, yeah, I think I'm starting to believe this. But there he's like, that's the line. I won't let myself be carried away that far.
I think that maybe an interesting way of thinking about the boundary issue is to talk about it in terms of hospitality and what are the limits of hospitality, rather than sort of the ideas and whether there's agreement or disagreement, but it's more of like, for example, if you're being welcomed somewhere, like across some boundary, across somewhere, what are you okay with? What you're
right.
And also as a host, like what are the limits to hospitality? But and that's a wisdom call. But I think framing it as an issue of hospitality rather than like just identity or ethnicity or whatever. Like,
and Paul says, don't even eat with such people. Like, he speaks of people where there's enough division where he says, don't even have a meal with them.
Yeah, which is a good. I mean, it's actually a good example of he's actually applying the principle of exclusion. It's hard for us to understand it in our own culture because we don't. I mean, actually, many people do this, but perhaps most of us here don't. But it is a hospitality issue. I mean, if I invite my Muslim neighbors to my house for something to eat something, I mean, they're awestruck because no American ever does that. On average. But then I invite them to church, they will never step into a church.
And outside of this, they have the concept of platforming, right? Don't platform this person. Don't dignify that with a response, right? It's a sense of common hospitality, common respect. No, I won't even debate these points with you because I don't have that level of respect. It's like we're far beyond even breaking bread. Now I don't even want to hear your opinion.
I want to say my little thing because I probably got to get back to work, but I really appreciate what Cassie was saying about, that she still had the respect for the people that are in these churches, even though it's like, you're not the right fit and it's not the right place for you. That's my experience. And I had I had the blessing, you could say, that I moved geographically. So cutting ties with the church that I was at with a long time, it was a good time to leave, and I was able to maintain relationships with the people there on good terms, even though I'd suffered a lot of wounds there, and I was like, well, I know I'm not going to look for a church that is exactly like that one in the future. But I think that these kind of like discussion about whether or not we should be evangelizing and things like that is kind of pretty myopic into our own times, in that like we really value this kind of liberty of people to discover their own path or whatever. But it's like the Tom Holland thing, the Dominion book. We live in such a world that's fundamentally so Christian that we don't realize what the real alternatives are. Because like when you had the apostles starting churches and stuff, they're going into these cities where people would decide, oh, this child is the wrong gender, put it outside, and the neighbors got to hear a crying baby sitting outside for like days, just starving to death, until the weird Christian concept of picking up these abandoned babies and taking care of them, eventually, like they evangelized pretty much the whole world to accept that value as like a better thing, you know? So like there's, you know, I think the key thing that I think Christians, and this is a problem, is that Christians who want to evangelize, but they feel like they have to hide their faults. You know, that's really where a lot of this damage is done, because there may be times when you reach out to say something and it was the wrong thing to do, or it was awkward, or it offended that other person. But there might be times when it's exactly the right thing to do. And there's a mechanism for dealing with that, is that when you hurt somebody, you just said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you, I didn't mean to do that, please forgive me, and then you can move on. Like that mechanism is what's like missing from so much of society, because as soon as somebody is offended, we just say they're justified in cutting ties. And you know what that's trained people to do is not reach out, even in basic kindness. And like I could even, okay, this is even a really specific example I'll share. So in my work, the job I had, I could go work in people's houses, and just knock on the door and be friendly. And, you know, sometimes you notice things or whatever about, about what the things in their house, and maybe you start a conversation. I'm not super outgoing, but I would do that from time to time or whatever. But I noticed like a whole attitude changed with like kind of the George Floyd thing, where when I was like going into like black people's houses or something, just of like, what are they expecting of me? Like in like, whereas before that, like I knew, you know, I had black friends, and like I knew how to like just the neutral space for us to like interact. The colorblind thing, like, I could understand that. But then when it became this like different dynamic where people were, you know, having all the sensitivity about like white people making assumptions about them or whatever, you know, I was just like, okay, well, I'm just going to retreat to the line of professionality. So I just do everything professional, but I wouldn't go beyond that. And you know, that was just that's like my fear of conflict. I didn't want to engage, just because it's like, and it's the same thing with like guys not asking girls out on dates, because you never know, is this going to be taken as sexual harassment, or, you know, like our rules of like how to interact have gotten so muddy and confusing because we don't know how to forgive anybody that makes a mistake. So yeah, that's my bit.
Okay, I'm going to get going. Michael, you have to go work because you have to come to the Bible study in 40 minutes on Jacob's channel.
Yeah, I might be a little late, but we'll see.
All right, how about?
All right, I'll see you.
Sam, do you have anything? I think someone was trying to jump on here. They wanted to jump in. Who was? Jason.
Well, I guess I'm up for. Yeah, I'm up for staying for a few minutes more. I thought it was over because everyone else left. So, yeah. No, I guess I'll give my 2 cents for anyone who really is still paying attention and cares, which is, I guess I think of this conversation, and I guess on a sort of big picture level, the way I see it is, the question is, how do you, if you consider yourself a follower of Christ, how do you honor Christ? And first and foremost, but also how do you honor the witness of the church and sort of the family of believers? And I guess I think about that, and I think there is a decent argument to be made that in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of what I've heard called easy believism. I won't use Luke's language, but I'm sure some people here think of a term that he has used a number of times in that regard. And I think there's something to be said for the idea of just getting someone to raise their hand and say, I'm on this team. Maybe that isn't honoring of God if you're not asking for more changes, but at the same time, I think it's something we have the privilege of having an academic discussion about, right? And for a lot of people in a lot of the world, I mean, are you a Christian is not a purely academic or purely abstract question. I know Mark F., for example, has told me a few times of a story of a guy who was raised in a Muslim country. He learned about Christianity when he was studying Italian, and he saw a picture of a cross in a book that he was using to learn Italian, and he came to the U.S. eventually, but I guess he can't go back to his own country now, and he's cut ties with a lot of family members. And I mean, that experience is definitely not foreign to the history of the church. I mean, so, I mean, I can't help but thinking, like, if we equivocate and we, give the Jordan Peterson answer, I shouldn't pick on Jordan Peterson. I mean, granted, he's big enough to take it, but I don't know if he considers himself a believer or not, but if you do and you give something less than the affirmative, if people ask, I mean, are you honoring the witness of Christ in the church? I mean, it seems to me a good question, but.
Mitch, you and Jason wanted to jump in here. What did you guys have to say?
He's still trying to. He has to his computer, but
do you hear me?
You know, yeah. Can you hear us?
I was testing, and that problem isn't happening now.
Great.
So go ahead. I'll listen to you for a bit, but I do want to say a couple of things. Real quick.
I feel like I just have this very brass tacks just way of thinking about this, and it doesn't feel like there's any world in which people really think you should proselytize in general. Maybe there's a world where people think you shouldn't proselytize your faith. It feels like there's no, because ideas have consequences, and because what you believe has consequences, you're obviously going to try to persuade people to your understanding of a truth. And even though you could be wrong, you still have to unfortunately do that. You have to risk being wrong for other people. And even if you're leading in whatever capacity, whether it's in sort of just a sphere of influence type of way, or whether you're the head of a family, or that you're the head of a vocational type space, you have to pull triggers and make decisions that could be wrong and could have bad consequences for other people. And then you kind of have to do it again. Like, even if you're wrong about something. And this is just all of life. All of life is you're proselytizing things. But I mean, in the Christian imagination, I don't know. To me, it seems like scripturally clear. I don't know if that's just an old hat way of looking at things, but to me, it seems like scripturally we're encouraged to be vocal about our faith and even attempt to convince others of the hope that we have, give a defense for it. And so that's just my kind of old-fashioned view on things, I guess.
Would you wear a Jesus t-shirt to go back to the hypothetical? That was for Mitch.
That's what you said. I've got a little lag here.
I feel like we're very spoiled, and there are so many Christians around the world that are really honestly persecuted. It's a frightening thing, and it's a serious thing, I think, because you look at wherever, how the way that Islam has moved over the land masses that they've come, they very seldom do they revert back, and they plant their mosques right on top of the churches. They're very militaristic about it. It's but that's all I got.
Thanks. Jason, can you thanks Jason. John, can you?
Yeah, I can hear you guys. Sorry it took me a minute. There is a little bit, like Mitch said, there's a little bit of a lag, so it's kind of hard to, but I'm picking things up, so let me know if you have trouble hearing me or anything.
So we can hear you. I know you wanted to jump in with some thoughts. What were some of your thoughts?
I didn't have any thoughts. Mitch kept goading me into this. He kept saying, get on there. So I asked the link for him. But one of the thoughts that came to mind while Mitch was talking to, though, he said we're constantly trying to do this. And you kind of share what you think is good, true, and beautiful with people. So you're kind of always doing that. Because I guess, like David said earlier, it's almost like there's something you're excited about, something you see that's good for you. I'm wondering, because, you run into those, it seems like people that seem extremely content and they just never speak up. They're just always like they don't share their opinions unless they're asked about it. And they just seem like we often regard people by people that
It's kind of roboting. You're roboting pretty bad, Jason.
Oh, sorry. I don't know. Can you hear me better now?
No, I think it's probably. It sounds like you guys are in a coffee shop or something. It's pretty hard. The connection's pretty hard to catch up. Too bad. I love hearing you guys. There you guys.
But you have to risk doing that. I think Jason was saying that you have to. A lot of people will be quiet and they'll seem wise, and that can be preferable. But I think you have to kind of risk being foolish sometimes for the sake of others, and that's not easy. And like I said, yeah, you risk being wrong.
Yeah, I guess I'd come back to Luke would talk about this. And Mitch, if you could just mute the interim between when you're perfect. I think a lot of this just comes back to like, what's my pay grade? So, like, the fact of the matter is what I can really control and what can I affect. It's like, I'm not in charge of any of this institutional church, and I don't have to go out and stand for all this stuff or try to build this thing. I mean, my responsibility is, right in front of me, myself, then it would be my family, then maybe my community at large or whatever. And so even, there was this great book that I read probably in 2010 or 11. It was called Slow Evangelism. And really what it was talking about is that it's about living it. Like, it's about living it out in your life, like the most, like, instead of worrying about trying to stand up for Christianity, whatever that might be. But it had talked about that really it's the life you live and the relationships you build. I think Mandy referred to this earlier, like, and I'll say something crass, like a lot of Christians want to quote unquote befriend a person to get in their spiritual pants, so to speak. But if that person doesn't want to convert to Christianity, then they kind of move on. And it's the reality is it's like, what can we really do as individuals? We need to be transformed. I mentioned earlier, 12-step programs talk about being programs of attraction rather than promotion. And most evangelism happens over a long period of time. Like, people see how you're living their life. You And then ultimately some crisis, something will happen and they'll want something that you have, and then they'll come and ask you to lay a question, and then you can share things with them. And so so individually, like, I need to speak with integrity like Job. So if there are things that are going on around me, like, I don't have to capitulate or do things that go against my integrity. And I think that's where we should live and kind of have our being. Now, I mean, within certain church structures, there are people that are responsible for whatever that might be, and I guess I just leave that to them. It's kind of outside my pay grade. So, like, would I be someone like So Lucas talked about this. Like, I'm such a zealot that I would love to be martyred. And so, I mean, I hate it, but I'm the sort of guy that would totally martyr himself for Christ, because that's a big, grand gesture. And that's really easy to do. Like, it's like in a moment, you give your life up, you get to be a martyr, whatever that is. You know what's really hard? Getting up every single day and doing the small things of life and enduring the small sufferings and the small difficulties and trying to live out that quiet life, that simple life, the life that most of us have in front of us. Like, that's the hard thing. And then it's hard because you have to get up and do it day after day after day after day after day, So, I mean, all this stuff about, yes, I feel all this stuff in the culture. And I mean, I'm like all of you, I feel the attack. Do I think we are moving towards a day where there could be a persecuted church in America? Sure. Certain powerful folks, but we've seen with communism and the move towards authoritarianism, one of the things that they've got to do is they've got to try to eliminate Christianity, right? I mean, you saw that in Russia, you see that in, Marxist societies and those sorts of things. It's one of the things that happens. So, yeah, if I live in a persecuted society, am I going to kowtow? No. Does that mean I could get canceled or put in jail or potentially killed for it? Well, if that happens here, sure, I'll do that. But I don't know that I need to stand for Christianity across the globe, in some of those things. Anyway, those are just some of the thoughts.
Lance, did you watch the conversation that PVK just released with Jared?
No.
I think it's interesting to hear his story. He's the guy who had a conversation with Chad as well, and he seemed to be a kind of super zealous Christian, went from that to, well, perhaps an equally zealous nihilist or atheist, but maybe not zealous. But anyway, it's related to what you're talking about. I think there's a interesting something within this American evangelical spirit of Christianity that I was always looking to be persecuted. I mean, I was part of Bible studies 10 years ago that were like talking about when is it really going to pick up, and it's always like, we're always trying to predict it, right? The law, this coming law or the next thing or cultural shift or whatever. It's almost a weird sort of thing with I don't know, maybe it's a Christian thing, but I've seen it a lot.
Well, no, I think victim mentality. I know that's kind of a weird jump there, but I think what you're pointing to is something like that, right?
Yeah. Like
everyone wants to, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I think persecution is a funny thing because, I mean, yeah, it's almost like if you've been to those countries where persecution of Christians really happens, like people are not. It's often considered sort of foolish to be just apprehended because you're on the street preaching the gospel or something like that, or like sharing your opinions openly and without any kind of filter. Usually, it's almost like people understand that persecution is justified. Like if you're living in an environment that everyone knows, if you're going to be talking about this kind of stuff, it's going to be you're going to be clearly persecuted, and then people just don't follow you. But I think persecution can be more tricky because it's often goes after. You would go after, like if someone would be persecuted on the TLC, they would go after the organizers, right? The people that are trying to bring people together. Maybe not necessarily the people that are out there sharing their opinions or whatever, but they're sort of like behind the scenes working the thing. So we gotta get our definition of persecution a little differently too.
Yeah, so Anselman said, do you mean to ignore what's happening to your fellow Christians across the globe? No, there absolutely is a persecuted church. There are individuals that are being persecuted. I have a cousin who knew he wanted to be a missionary his whole life, and he went over and he actually married a Persian gal. I can't remember. I think her family was originally from Iraq, but they were living in Turkey. So like she actually had brothers and uncles who actually had been jailed. Some of them had been executed for going into Iraq and preaching Christianity. So they used to sneak in across the border and do those things. Like, so it's like that stuff's like really real. Like, no, that stuff is happening and it happens. And then you can look, you know, in certain places, you know, in China, I have friends who have to sneakily get into China and have to be very careful about what they're going over for. And they do these underground, basically seminaries where they're equipping Christian folks to learn how to do church underground, right? So Anselman, no, I know that it's going on. So how do I handle that? Anselman? I support those groups and those institutions with my money, right? I support those people, you know, in their endeavors to do whatever they would want to do. So I mean, that's why I take it down from this global thing and everything else. And you know, I'll certainly will speak out about it. But again, I think so much of what I can get caught up, and I would say this about politically, like I have certain views and I see certain things that are going on, but I can't let that consume my daily thinking and allow me to be enraged and everything else. Like I got to live today in this moment, and I have things that I can and can't do. And I can participate in the process when it's time for me to participate in the process. There may be a time that I might need to be out in the streets. I'll do that if the time comes for that, right? I think probably I'd be ready to get out there now a little more, but at any rate, so yeah, I think there are times to move and to do things. But I think we need to focus much more about our own life and the impacts we can be having in our own little actual, let's just say, controllable spheres or places where we can truly be impacted. I mean, that's where I start always.
So I guess I would agree with that broadly, but I would maybe ask one follow-up question, which is that, I mean, do we think there's people in this little corner that are too aggressive in proselytizing? Because I guess I think about it and it's like, yes, you can be that way. I definitely wouldn't doubt it. And I think being a witness ultimately means leading with your life. But I also think there can be another temptation, which is the temptation to, I mean, well, you see it in mainline Christianity, right? Which is a temptation to completely ignore the propositional or the sort of, I guess, the affiliation with other Christians. And I don't know, I guess I don't necessarily see, like, in the Discord or on the live streams, a lot of people who are Bible thumpers, so to speak. I sense that maybe to some extent there's kind of the opposite temptation.
Well, we're a unique lot here. I mean, so we're trying to have good faith conversations across, you know, ecumenical faith lines, so on and so forth. We're trying to have, you know, as human beings, how do we have conversations where we're not all going to agree on certain things, but how can we come together and have conversations? Like, this is a very unique space. I think it's also entirely appropriate to have spaces where you can talk freely, like about with fellow folks that you've been persuaded and you see things a certain way, that you can be able to talk freely. You know, so there's okay for that spaces. And I would say that they're like on these live streams and other places, it tries to be a place where it's not a Bible banging place, so to speak, just to use a crass term or whatever. But there certainly are Bible bangers amongst our midst. And there's, I'll call out Chad.
What is a Bible banger?
There you go. Big book bangers. Like, people have their
I've heard of Bible thumpers.
There we go.
Bible Bangers was a tooth and nail band from the 90s, I think.
And,
oh, really? That's hilarious.
Not really. I said it sounds like one though.
And T-Grog
That's
comes
funny.
into White Knight for what is it, physicalist, atheistic, whatever I can't remember what his terms are. So people come in here with those sorts of things, but it's all about the right time and the right place. Like Paul will have conversations here. Won't be that different, but when he's in his official capacity as a CRCNA pastor, like there's the right time and place for certain things, and certain conversations.
I guess if you're having a conversation at all, unless you just want it to be affirmation swaps, then there's going to be some kind of proselytization going on. I'm going to hone the idea you present a little bit. We're going to pass it back and forth and get it right. We're going to get it to its best self.
Well, I'm gonna bow out. Thanks, Lance, and thanks to thanks to Luke for starting everything up today.
If you think about it, I guess this space is like it's a space that invites proselytization the most, by virtue of, wanting people of different ideas to come in and express themselves. And if they're doing that just for the sake of, I don't know, it feels like there needs to be a better point to it. We don't want to just have, different ideas for the sake of having different ideas. We want to give that idea an opportunity to land on us and see if we find a sheen of truth in it. And if we present an idea, it's an invitation in some way for someone to rebuke it or to judge it. So that's an invitation that's healthy for us to make when we present an idea of our own.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned Sam's channel, Transfigured, and I mentioned it. One of the things I really respect about Sam and who he is, he'll have all sorts of different people on his channel, and particularly even people that he doesn't agree with. In a lot of ways, Sam just likes to proof test his thinking out loud, like with folks. And I really respect that about Sam, right? And one of the simple ways you can talk about, this space that we're in here right now is it's a place for sense making, right? And so you have a lot of these things, you're kicking around these ideas. I come here, I like to listen. I also like to throw some ideas out, hear what people have to say about it. But ultimately, we all then grab out of that, like what we do with that. Like, hopefully we're all trying to take these things that we hear out here and pull them into our own personal lives, right? And take the bits that make sense for us and make, that ultimately impact us and maybe open us up to something new that we can apply in our own lives, or that, our worldview or whatever. But, clearly I'm not here to just assimilate to every view that's espoused on here, right? None of us would do that, right? And so what I like here is I've actually had some of my worldviews and the way I see the world changed by conversations that people have had on here, right? Because after I ruminated on it, like I'm like, oh my gosh, like that actually makes more sense. Like I thought I used to have this proposition. This is simple. I had this propositional belief, but now that I've had a chance to look at it and, see it from a different angle, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, yeah.
After which we say thank you for proselytizing, and then go and do likewise, do unto others. It's very, very good to be proselytized upon and to proselytize upon others. That's loving your neighbor, I guess.
Yeah. So Anselman's in the comments talking about Bible thumper and stuff like that, which is, people who feel that or whatever, it's not to degrade that. It's like people who have a spirit they're fundamentalists, and we all know what that term means. And I understand people don't want to wear that, but it's a real thing. You know what I mean? And so
I think that's something I would earlier in this chat, I put a quote from St. Benedict's rule, and it's amazing if you just read the rule, it's like Bible quote after Bible quote. So I don't know if there's a difference, right, Lance? I guess maybe to get Anselman's point there, like I think, yeah, like you said, it's the spirit rather than like, because you can sort of embody, you can so embody scripture in your language and your attitude and your thinking that it would be easy to kind of sort of quote. I mean, Peugeot is a little bit like that. Like he's obviously embodied scripture to an extent that he doesn't quote things, but you can always see that it's there. Like he's not an original thinker in that way. Like he's a Bible thumper, but it's a sneaky way of doing it. Perhaps because it doesn't have that spirit. Saint Benedict, the Bible thumper. He might have been a Bible thumper. Who knows? I don't know. Those were heavy Bibles back then too.
Well, and so one of the things, like I've actually never, which is really weird because I've had, particularly, I'm getting older, so it's harder, but younger, I was a person who could really grab, like I could see sentences and stuff or whatever, but I've always never been good about using the chapter and verse, but I know the basically the sentence or the spirit of it. So, that sort of stuff, kind of, it does come out of you. One of the things that I pushed at for a long time, this has nothing to do with orthodoxy, but I pushed at it a long time, is people loved it. Oh, I have a verse for that, right? So if you have an answer and they whip out some, what I call soundbite theology, oh, here's this thing, right? And a lot of times would be like, it's also like, I'm like, dude, that's totally taken out of context. Like read the whole chapter. And then by the way, then go back and read the whole Psalm that it was referring to. And by the way, where that really gets harmful is like, and I'm not answering, I'm not saying you're doing this or whatever, but I'm just saying this has happened. Like I had a good friend who struggled with cystic fibrosis. He's wasn't supposed to live past his 20s. He's now close to 40 now. And he was in kind of my house church pastoring movement. And a lot of people, and he couldn't breathe and he was looking for lung transplants or whatever. And a lot of people would like whip out, oh, you should be joyful in your sufferings. And he's like, are you seriously? You're going to give me that Bible? You know what I mean? Like he was very nice or whatever, but when he talks honestly, it's like, don't quote me a Bible verse, or when someone's just died and you quote some Bible verse at them or whatever, they're like, dude, you're missing the whole thing here. Right. And those are some extreme examples, but there's a verse for that, so to speak. It's like, God, we're human beings. You know what I mean? And besides, a lot of times, people do that. And again, I'm not saying you do that. I'm just talking about, if you would talk to folks who aren't Christian, when we come with just a Bible verse to them and we quote it, oh, that's John, whatever, da 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 da. Like they don't have any context for that, right? Now, you can talk about, this is where 12-step stuff is good because it's it grabs the spirit of it. Like you can communicate the wisdom and the spirit of something, a truth, right? Without trying to, whip a Bible verse out on someone, if that makes sense, Anthony.
Well, Lance, I gotta take off again. This is the second time I've joined and the second time I'll leave. So.
Yeah, we'll wrap this up, everyone. We all need to get back. I just jumped in when Luke wanted to jump off, and so Luke, as always, kicked up a lot of dirt and got a lot of people interested, and so I hope everyone has a great day.
Bye.
Bless the Lord, O my soul. O Lord my God, you are very great. You are clothed with splendor and majesty, covering yourself with the light as with a garment, stretching out the heavens like a tent. He lays the beams of his chambers on the waters. He makes the clouds his chariot. He rides on the wings of the wind. He makes his messengers winds, and his ministers a flaming fire. He set the earth on its foundations so that it should never be moved. You covered it with the deep as with a garment. The water stood above the mountains. At your rebuke they fled. At the sound of your thunder they took to flight. The mountains rose, the valleys sank down to the place where you appointed for them. You set a boundary that they may not pass, so that they might not again cover the earth. You make springs gush forth in the valleys. They flow between the hills. They give drink to every beast of the field. The wild donkeys quench their thirst. Beside them, the birds of the heavens dwell. They sing among the branches. From your lofty abode, you water the mountains. The earth is satisfied with the fruit of your work. You cause the grass to grow for the livestock and plants for man to cultivate, that he may bring forth food from the earth, and wine to gladden the heart of man, oil to make his face shine, and bread to strengthen man's heart. The trees of the Lord are watered abundantly, the cedars of Lebanon that he planted. In them the birds build their nests. The stork has her home in the fir trees. The high mountains are for the wild goats. The rocks are a refuge for the rock badgers. He made the moon to mark the seasons. The sun knows its time for setting. You made darkness, and it is night, for all the beasts of the forest creep about. The young lions roar for their prey, seeking their food from God. When the sun rises, they steal away and lie down in their dens. Man goes to his work and to his labor until the evening. O Lord, how manifold are your works! In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. Here's the sea, great and wide, which teems with creatures innumerable, living things both small and great. There go the ships and Leviathan, which you formed to play in it. These all look to you to give them their food in due season. When you give it to them, they gather it up. When you open your hand, they are filled with good things. When you hide your face, they are dismayed. When you take away their breath, they die and return to their dust. When you send forth your spirit, they are created, and you renew the face of the ground. May the glory of the Lord endure forever. May the Lord rejoice in his works. Who looks on the earth and it trembles, who touches the mountains and they smoke. I will sing to the Lord as long as I live. I will sing praise to my God while I have being. May my meditations be pleasing to him, for I rejoice in the Lord. Let sinners be consumed from the earth, and let the wicked be no more. Bless the Lord, O my soul. Praise the Lord.
This is where we're in the liminal space
where the stream didn't end. Can you hear me? All right. Stream didn't end. Wait for the end for Luke and Grail Country are on to us. All right, I'm reading out of Romans. The purpose was to make him the father of all who believed without being circumcised, so that righteousness could be counted to them as well, and to make him the father of the circumcised who were not merely circumcised, but also walk in the footsteps of the faith that our father Abraham had before he was circumcised. For the promise to Abraham and his offspring that he would be the heir of the world did not come through the law, but through the righteousness of faith. For if it is the adherents of the law who are to be the heirs, faith is null and the promise is void. For the law brings wrath, but where there is no law, there is no transgression. That is why it depends by faith, in order that the promise may rest on grace and be guaranteed to all his offspring, not only to the adherents of the law, but also to the one who shares the faith of Abraham, who is the father of us all. As it is written, I have made you the father of many nations, in the presence of God in whom he believed, who gives life to the dead and calls into existence the things that do not exist. In hope he believed against hope, that he should become the father of many nations, as he has been told, so shall your offspring be. He did not weaken in faith when he considered his own body, which was as good as dead, since he was about 100 years old, or when he considered the barrenness of Sarah's womb. No unbelief made him waver concerning the promise of God, but he grew strong in his faith and gave glory to God, fully convinced that God was able to do what he had promised. This is why his faith was counted to him as righteousness. But the words it was counted to him were not written for his sake alone, but for ours also. It will be counted to us who believe in him, who raised from the dead Jesus our Lord, who was delivered up for our trespasses and raised for our justification.